Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Katzimatidis here. It's Sunday morning. Well, there's so many things going on in Washington, I lose track. And one smart guy that I always go to is Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, and to me, one common sense guy. Good morning, Newt. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, and the weather's getting prettier, and spring, I think, is just about here now, so it's a little hard not to be happy and optimistic just when you look at the arrival of spring. But it's also hard not to be alarmed and upset when you look at the kind of things we're seeing out of the Biden administration and the House and the Democrats in the House and Senate. So to me, it's an interesting balance between what's going on personally with the arrival of spring and what's happening to our country as these people engage in really radical behaviors.
What Washington is doing is tearing down a lot of parts of our country, and I'm very, very much concerned about it. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, I think the most amazing and most egregious was the reaction of Biden and Harris to the jury's decision in Minneapolis. I mean, they had an opportunity to come out and say, look, the system works. Here's a policeman who's now been convicted on all three counts. We can feel good about how America deals with these kind of issues. And instead they came out and they went off on a whole rant about institutional racism. And they could not have done a better job of tearing down America if they were Chinese communist propagandists. And in fact, if you go back and look at the speech given by the Chinese Communist foreign minister in Anchorage, Alaska, about 2 weeks ago, they track exactly with the same attacks on the United States, the same condemnation of America, the same lies about who we are as a country. And what I find amazing is here you have a president who spent 2 terms as vice president for Barack Obama, an African-American president. You have a vice president who came from a mixed African and Asian background, who was elected Attorney General of California, elected United States Senator from California, is now the Vice President of the United States. And instead of celebrating the fact that this is proof that America is working, that we in fact can see beyond race, we can see each other as Americans, they're both propagandists for this institutional racism lie, and they're both tearing down a country, even at a time when a white policeman was being convicted by a jury for having killed an African-American, George Floyd. So I'm appalled at the kind of hostility to the United States that we're getting out of our president and our vice president.
And the ambassador to the UN, everybody was shocked at some of the things that she said.
No, but she actually fits into the Biden's hostility to America. It's very strange to say, I think accurately, that this is the most anti-American presidency in our country's history. It's astonishing to watch what they're doing, and then to look at the Secretary of State who tweeted the other night about institutional racism in America, just 2 weeks after he had been lectured in public by the Chinese communists. And what people have to understand is, if you want to look for institutional racism, look to China, where they're currently accused of literally killing thousands and imprisoning tens of thousands of Uyghurs in Western China, where they are destroying the Tibetan Buddhist culture, where they are cracking down and imposing dictatorship in Hong Kong. I mean, there is a dictatorship that's truly violating all the norms, and yet we now are portrayed around the world, and all they got to do is show video of Biden and Harris and of Antony Blinken, who is the American Secretary of State, who I saw no reason for him to get involved and tweet about institutional racism as Secretary of State, particularly when he knew that was a major theme of Chinese communist propaganda. So I think we have every reason to be deeply concerned. And I think from the standpoint of both Putin in Russia and Xi Jinping in China, they're looking at an administration that they measure as very, very weak. And I'm afraid we may see some real adventures by the Russians and the Chinese to test us and see how far they can push the Biden administration.
Since we're on China, I'll give you another one you may or may not know. I've been scratching my head with Larry Kudlow the other day, and the fact that why are we pushing electric cars in America? We have 100 years worth of oil. The reason? China makes 90% of the batteries that go into those electric cars. And in the $2 trillion budget, we include $280 billion to help the Chinese sell more electric cars. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's typical of what you're seeing. You have a very smart Chinese dictatorship, which is running circles around the American bureaucracy. You have very left-wing Americans who really, I think, prefer China to the United States. You get people like the special envoy for the climate, John Kerry, who says, oh, I really know the Chinese. Well, it always scares me if John Kerry says he knows something, because the odds are very high he doesn't. And they're just going to be taken to the cleaners. I mean, this is exactly what led to the rise of Trump in 2015 and 2016, was this sense that you had an incompetence in dealing with the real world. And these folks, I think, live in a fantasy world. They make up words. They recently have been making up a new definition of infrastructure, a new definition of bipartisanship, new definitions for illegal immigration. And, of course, you're sitting there in a state which passed a budget which provides for $15,000 for illegal immigrants who got COVID. So if you come to America and you get COVID, we give you $15,000. And then we wonder why there's so many people coming north from El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala. The word's on the street out there that, Biden wants you to come, and heck, they'll give you free health care. Then if you may get up to $15,000 in straight cash. This is an administration which, and the Democrats in the House and Senate are worse, and they exist in a fantasy world where, much like Humpty Dumpty and Alice in Wonderland, they just redefine words to mean what they want them to mean. Now, and I think it's extraordinarily dangerous.
Mr. Speaker, you have the pulse of America. You know our country. Do the American people realize what they did wrong? That Washington is really broken and what President Biden is doing?
Oh, I think increasingly it's penetrating despite the news media's best efforts to protect Biden. And you saw this, by the way, when I talked about the news media's efforts. When the policeman in Columbus, Ohio, was called on a 911 call because a young woman with a knife was trying to kill another young woman of the same age. I think they're both 16. And he knew that just down the road in Cincinnati last week, that a 13-year-old girl with a knife did kill another 13-year-old girl. And so he intervened and did what I thought was the right thing, which is stop the attacker who has a knife and is trying to kill somebody. This was all involved two young ladies who were African-American. The effort that places made, like CNN and the New York Times and others, to avoid telling the truth about this story because it didn't fit their narrative of, the police being bad to African Americans, et cetera. Instead, you had a policeman doing exactly the right thing. The body cam proves it because you can see the attack, and you can see that this woman is actually actively trying to kill this other girl. And you have to say to yourself, so what would you have done? Well, the mayor of Chicago has announced that people should not be endangered in a chase on foot, and she wants them to actually change the rules in Chicago. So you have to call your supervisor and get permission to chase down a criminal. Now, if you think about it in the real world, that just verges on Looney Tunes. You're going to stop in the middle of the chase and say, "I can't come. Would you please wait for a minute while I call my supervisor?"
That's funny. It's just stupid. It's the dumbing down of America. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
And we're now seeing the dumbing down reach our elected officials.
Now let's go back to Washington. This week, they want to make Washington the 51st state. They're threatening the Supreme Court that if you don't do things our way, we may pack the court. I mean, tell me. I mean, it's ludicrous. Tell me what you think.
Well, look, I think what you're seeing, first of all, I did a podcast the other day with an attorney general at the state level who had filed the lawsuit, has sent a letter to the House and Senate saying they will file a lawsuit the minute that this passes because they believe it's unconstitutional. The Constitution provides for a federal district that was done very deliberately by the Founding Fathers. They had experienced in Philadelphia riots and mobs designed to pressure the government, and they wanted to create a unique district outside of any of the states. Virginia and Maryland agreed to give the land over to create what was called a federal district. They believe that these attorney generals, I think 24 of them signed the letter, believe absolutely that it's unconstitutional to try to create a state out of the District of Columbia by just legislation. They believe it would take a constitutional amendment since it's actually written into the Constitution. But everybody knows what the game is. Look, the Democrats are desperate. They know that they are probably in 2022 going to be annihilated in the House. The last two times the Democrats won the presidency, they lost 54 seats in 1994. They lost 63 seats in 2010. It's almost certain that Kevin McCarthy is going to be the next Speaker of the House. And so they're desperately trying to use this brief window of opportunity to go out and change the rules of the game every way they can, whether it's the Corrupt Politicians Act, H.R. 1, which would really totally change the election to make it harder for conservatives to win, or it's this effort to create two new senators and a member of Congress, out of the District of Columbia, or it's their effort to pack the Supreme Court and put liberals on there to be able to move it to the left. All these things are a desperate grab for power. I think all of them are going to end up not passing because I think there are enough senators on the Democratic side who realize that this stuff's just crazy. But you have to give Nancy Pelosi credit. She runs a real machine. She has gotten that machine to vote against its own interests again and again and again. I mean, she probably had 30 to 50 members who knew that their districts just deeply opposed creating a state out of the District of Columbia. She probably has 80, maybe she may have as many as 150 members who know that if you understood what was in H.R. 1, the Corrupt Politicians Act, that it would have massive opposition. 90% of the American people want to have American citizens only allowed to vote in the elections. Well, H.R. 1 blocks that. Almost nobody favors the federal government, the taxpayer, paying for and subsidizing politicians running for office. H.R. 1 has, paid political campaigns where you, the taxpayer, are financing people who you may deeply disagree with. You just go down the list. And Pelosi has been very effective at keeping her narrow majority as a machine, even though she's getting them to vote against their interests back home, and they are not going to be able to go home and explain all these votes. And she's, in effect, spending the future in a desperate bid to get everything done in the next 2 years.
We have destroyed our cities where the Democrats, have control. San Francisco is destroyed. Chicago is getting destroyed. New York City is getting destroyed. Philadelphia getting destroyed. Did American people finally realize this?
I think they're beginning to, and I think if Republicans were more articulate, they would realize it more rapidly and more deeply. I mean, these are failures of policy. We don't have a massive increase in the murder rate just as a random accident. We don't have children under 10 years of age being killed just as a random accident. We don't have a huge jump in carjackings just as a random accident. We don't have, and you just saw yesterday when Biden came out, it was reported that Biden was going to massively increase the capital gains tax, and the stock market began to fall. I mean, if they work at it hard enough, they're going to cripple the United States on fossil fuel where we have enough to be energy independent. They're going to destroy American industries. They're going to set up a situation where the Chinese are dominant economically, and they're going to set up a situation where our cities are ungovernable. The rules allow criminals to get back on the street immediately with no bail, and where they want to discriminate against the police while they're also releasing criminals from hardened criminals, murderers, rapists, armed robbers from prison, putting them back on the street. So, I mean, these things are a matter of left-wing policies that just don't work. and I think people are beginning to realize that, and I think it's going to occur. These are the kind of things that very rapidly gain momentum because as they fail to work, more and more people realize this is just not going to work.
Newt Gingrich, thank you for your common sense. Thank you for expressing it to the American people, and let's get the truth out there. And I stand beside you on getting the truth out because otherwise there won't be a 2076, the 300th year of the United States. God bless you. God bless America.
Take care. Thank you.
Talk again soon. Take care.
Have a great weekend.
You too.